My name is Laura Tangakani. I'll be your moderator for today, and hopefully we will have an exciting, very informative hour ahead of us. All right, I'd like to firstly introduce our panel. We have three exciting panelists that'll be joining us today. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to Neil Hare-Brown. Neil Hare-Brown has worked for over 30 years in the field of information security and formed the first digital forensic company in the UK in 1996, with the former head of the first computer crime unit, Met Police. Neil wrote Information Security Incident Management and Methodology in 2007, defining the best practices for cyber incident management. After providing digital forensics to the Met Police and other constabularies for many years, Neil went on to form Storm Guidance in 2014. Pioneering in the field of digital investigations and cyber risk management, Storm's services can be accessed across the UK, US, and Africa, helping customers better manage cyber risk and respond effectively to cyber incidents. Through Neil's ability to find the best skills in the field, a dedicated team of specialists were formed with the mission to deliver excellence in cyber incident responses and in the demystification and objective measurements of cyber risk. With the mantra, access, plan, and respond, Storm set out to explain the value of cyber insurance, optimize cyber risk management maturity, and minimize losses when they occur. Can you give us a shout out, Neil?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks very much, Larissa.
Fantastic. Our second panelist is Alistair Tempest. Alistair Tempest is the CEO of the E-Commerce Forum Africa and CEO of the E-Commerce Forum South Africa. He has served as the president of the South African Institute of Interactive Marketing and Chief Operating Officer of the Direct Marketing Association of South Africa. Previously, as the Director General of the European Advertising Apartheid, was a director of Reader's Digest and was Director General of the Federation of European Direct and Interactive Marketing in Brussels. Excuse me. He chaired the Self-Regulatory and Consumer Protection Working Party of the Global Dialogue on E-Commerce and was a member of the International Chamber of Commerce, Marketing and Telecoms Commissions for 30 years. He has a BA Honours from the University of York, a Master's from the College of Europe in Bruges, and read for a PhD at the University of Ghent. Shall we say hello to our audiences, Alistair?
Hello, good morning, welcome.
Third, we have Carl Beck, Intersec System founding member. Carl Beck has a wealth of experience in initiating, establishing, and driving successful business enterprises. He graduated from the University of Witwatersrand in 1996 with a BSc degree in computer science and applied mathematics, and has been involved in the IT industry for over 25 years. Having a solid background architecting, integrating, and deploying large-scale enterprise solutions for global market leaders, security became the next imperative to safeguard such deployments. The establishment of Intersec in 2006 became the catalyst for Carl's cybersecurity initiatives. Today, the company offers trusted best of breed and best in class cybersecurity platforms that are seamlessly integrated to offer unparalleled enterprise system security. Carl, can you give us a hello on that side?
Morning, everybody.
Fabulous. Now that we have our panel here, before I kickstart the actual formal program of interacting with our panelists, I'd like to introduce the CEO of SAUBC, for which this event would not be taking place without, and that is Jackie Mpondo Hendricks. Excuse me. Jackie is the first Chief Executive Officer of the South African United Business Confederation, SAUBC. SA Confederation that represents cross-cutting business interests in South Africa, which consists of members that represent export councils, industry associations, and joint groups. Jackie, I'd like to welcome you to give us a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Program Director, for that wonderful introduction to our esteemed panelists. And I'm certainly not George Sibulela, as was initially on my screen. I'm currently standing in for our president due to some power issues, which is certainly a conversation and a session for another day in South Africa. I therefore wish to also welcome the audience that have made the time to actually join us on this, what I believe will be a very informative and critical webinar session that will begin to highlight and create the necessary awareness around cybercrime in South Africa and how it can potentially impact, especially in terms of our vision as an organization to make sure that South Africa becomes the preferred investment destination in the world, and also the preferred gateway into the continent. Now, when we look at that, we really need to start to interrogate some of the risk mitigating factors. And one of those certainly becomes cyber attacks, which definitely also impacts directly on us being positioned as a preferred investment destination. Further to that, one of our key focus areas, as per our president's message, is also that our efforts need to be focused on strengthening the growth strategy around 4IR, the trend towards digitization, which includes IoT, AI, big data, and robots, has begun to bring revolutionary change, a paradigm shift to many industries. But with this paradigm shift comes increased risk exposure and a different face and a different kind of risk that I think we also need to ensure awareness of amongst our members. Therefore, to strengthen the South African economy in such times, the public and private sectors need to cooperate in taking bold steps whilst keeping an eye on dramatic changes in industrial structure, whilst delivering economic growth through the use of innovative technology. 4IR, therefore, for us, aims to resolve increasingly complex social issues and pave the way to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We are therefore looking forward in joining and collaborating with partners like yourselves in creating a roadmap towards a fully functioning 4IR and a fully safe and secure 4IR, which we are prepared to also learn from the developed countries. And that's why we are so excited today that because of digital interaction and the borderlessness of the digital platform, that we're actually connecting globally as we speak. Now, just to bring it back maybe to South Africa, it was on the 22nd of July that the first reports emerged that Transnet, which is a South African state-owned enterprise, was experiencing problems with its information technology networks. For those who are joining us from other parts of the world, Transnet in South Africa manages the nation's rail, port, and pipeline infrastructure. The disruption primarily affected operations in several container terminals, interrupting cargo movement, and 4 days later, Transnet confirmed it had suffered a cyber attack. This attack is unprecedented because since the start of COVID-19 pandemic, the number of cyber attacks has been increasing worldwide, and in South Africa, inflicting financial losses across the manufacturing, banking, and energy sectors. South Africa's critical infrastructure has been targeted before with minor impact. The recent incident was the first time that the operational integrity of our country's critical maritime infrastructure has suffered a severe disruption. For me, what emerges out of this is that as South Africa, that we really need to strengthen our ability in securing our national interests against such attacks. This disruption further undermines our President Cyril Ramaphosa's commitment in May 2021 to a 100 billion infrastructure development project to make Durban the best functioning port in South Africa, in Africa, sorry. Attacks on critical infrastructure, including maritime ports, are likely to increase in severity and in quantity if certain measures are not put in place. The economic toll, therefore, on African states will inevitably be high. And when that is high, it means that it will impact directly on the intentions and the aspirations of the Free Africa Continental Trade Agreement. Therefore, when we look at all of this, we see that this can be a serious threat, not only in terms of trade and investment, but also in terms of it impacting on our membership-based operations. As the SAUBC, we represent over 70 trade councils, business associations, and chambers, with a collective membership of over 1 million SMMEs that collectively employ close to 6 million people. Now, with that at stake, it is critical and important that based on the contributions of our members, that they safeguard this through really seriously beginning to look into their cyber security readiness. And I'm looking forward to some of the further engagements that will emanate from this discussion. And whilst we're speaking members, we also need to ensure that we also mobilize government to then effectively be able to also be well equipped to actually deal with such incidents and in an effective and efficient manner. So upskilling of government will become key as we evolve some of these discussions for broader stakeholder engagements. So I look forward to this session. I look forward to what I believe will certainly be a learning for us and our members, and begin to prepare us to be ready for such attacks. Thank you.
Jackie, thank you so much for that. I think you have sort of given us a starting point. There's a lot to digest in there. But most importantly, what needs to be digested is that, cybersecurity should not be viewed as a problem for big corporations. It is something that can affect any business anywhere in the world today. And that brings me then to bringing our panelists into a discussion now. But remember that please use the chat function to introduce yourselves. We'd like to know who we have here. We also would like for you to have other people meet with you and know who you are as well. So Neil, I'm going to start with you. Given that October has been declared UN Cybersecurity Month, so starting tomorrow, we're all supposed to be getting more information about what cybersecurity is and where we stand in that regard. So I'll start with you by asking you, can you give us a global view of the cybercrime landscape?
Absolutely, Loretta. Yeah. So there are some quite staggering figures that are being put together by, I think, reasonably well-regarded sources over the state of cybercrime. We, as an organisation, investigate around about 300 incidents a year at the moment, and that number's rising. And that's just one. That's just on guidance. The number of ransomware attacks at the moment on businesses that are taking place, around one ransomware attack every 11 seconds takes place around the world. And each ransomware attack on average takes out the victim business for around 21 days of lost business. That's the average. So you can see that, that those organizations who can recover more quickly are also revealing that other organizations take a lot longer than 21 days to recover. And some businesses are finished. You know, they're going out of business and never to recover, unfortunately. So really, cybercrime is a pandemic. It's the fastest growing crime in the world. The two main types of incident, ransomware I've already mentioned, rose by 151% in 2021 in the first quarter. And business email compromise is also up significantly, 50% up on business email compromise attacks. There are lots of other types of attack as well, but they're certainly the two most common. The amount of money that's being stolen as well, for instance, in email scams, has risen by 300% in the last year. So, but the big problem, which I would just mention, and appreciating time, is I think, as Jackie's already mentioned, it's about investment, and many organisations have a significant lack of investment in information technology and the skills needed to secure that information technology adequately. And this is an issue globally around the world, and it makes it very hard for organizations to counter the cybercriminal threat, which has now really become significant organized crime. So where I would say 10 years ago, organized crime was still mainly involved in drugs and illegal gambling and that kind of stuff. Now they've significantly moved into cybercrime. It's a very, very low risk activity for the criminals, because criminals that, for instance, are outside of South Africa are very unlikely to be brought to justice, unfortunately, for the crimes that they commit within South Africa. I think, as you've already said, Loretta, the internet knows no jurisdictional boundaries, essentially, and so the criminals play on that fact to operate with impunity. So yeah, that's the situation at the moment. It's a pretty bleak one, and it's one which organisations have to really wake up. The last point I will make is that many organisations see cyber attacks as black swan events, which don't really or are unlikely to affect their organisation. And I would say that that is a very, very misadvised position to take. Unfortunately, the reputational damage that flows from cyber attacks, you've already mentioned Transnet, the Western Cape Blood Service, very severely attacked a few months ago, the Department of Justice, the Space Agency. You know, there are a growing list of organizations, both in South Africa and globally, that are affected. And unfortunately, businesses kind of, because of the reputational harm, if the press do not find out about those incidents and they're able to keep it confidential, then if you like, the downside of that is that organizations also don't realize the scale of the criminality that's taking place. And so they don't realize that essentially they could very well be the next on the list for the criminals. So with that, I will pass back to your good self.
Well, thank you, Neil. Those are frightening stats. I mean, particularly when you talk about attacks every 11 seconds throughout the world. That is quite a frightening statistic. Carl, let me bring you into here. Why do you think South African businesses are being targeted so heavily by cyber criminals? I mean, we may not hear of every story, but we do hear of very, very bad situations like Transnet and SAUBC, as was explained earlier by both Neil and Jackie. So why do you think South African businesses are being targeted?
Okay, so echoing on what Neil referred to, there's basically 4 points that we want to elaborate on as to why we are being targeted so heavily. The first one is general poor knowledge of IT and cyber threats. So South African users are less experienced and aware than in other countries, which makes us more vulnerable to cyber threats. We do not have the requisite cybersecurity measures in place like most other countries have. And this renders us relatively vulnerable to threat actors that use South Africa as a test ground for deploying a malware before moving to more sophisticated targets. On that, we have the fastest, SA has the fastest internet and GDP in Africa, which gives formulates a basis for new tech startups to boom. Obviously, this gives more exposure to the internet, which jeopardizes us further. I think on this issue of education, we've also adopted a rather blasé approach to cybersecurity, in that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that echoes throughout the private sector as well as government entities. Before 2014, SA was hardly mentioned by threat actors in the deep web and dark web forums. But since we became, there's been a much sharper focus amongst the criminal underground to intercept and exploit our systems. As a result, cybercriminals expect South African companies and government to be easy targets, and they exploit it because they most likely not going to be caught, because we do not have the proper law enforcement capability. The second issue on this is poor cybercrime legislation. We've been very slow to adopt cybercrime legislation, and the delays in its enforcement made the country a very safe haven for illegal operations. Lack of training to deal with cybercrimes also meant that the South African police service has been out of depth trying to deal with it. The third issue is poor investment in cybersecurity. There's little motivation for companies to expose and educate their staff on cybersecurity challenges. We've got very high crime rates, high unemployment rates, inequalities, shortage of skilled labor. And this means that businesses don't have funds to, or the resources to invest in cybersecurity training. Governance, risk and compliance in many companies, even government entities, is a paper-based policy that's hardly enforced as an operational framework. And from our experience in the private sector, it became very alarming that entities prefer to pass the buck to insurance companies who have introduced products to compensate for damages, due to cyber interception or data breaches. They opted to do this rather than to deal with obvious requirements to bolster their enterprise IT security. Lastly, poor awareness of shadow IT. Now, shadow IT is, since people started working at home, they use systems that they download or applications that they download, and they use it as part of their daily routines to deliver what's required from their job, job requirements. So these apps that they download and use on their PCs, some of them come with viruses or malware that can affect the companies that they're supposed to be supplying services to. Also, the use of IoT devices, personal devices in business networks, are ideal entry points for ransomware and other threats to be deployed onto networks. And these four reasons is why we think SA is being targeted so heavily by cybercriminals.
Well, Carl, you paint a very doom and gloom situation that we have on our hands here. So you're saying RSA is vulnerable. We were slow in adopting cybersecurity policy, poor investment, poor training, and bottom line, just ignorance on the part of a consumer or even a business in how you download material online and so on and so forth. So let me bring Alistair in here and get your perspective here. So Carl has just painted a very disturbing picture of our status quo in South Africa when it comes to cybersecurity. So why is there a general sense of apathy around it?
That's a million-dollar question. I really don't know, because I have used the e-commerce forum South Africa newsletter to inform people on a regular basis about the threats to cybersecurity. I believe that they're very real and very difficult to get grasp on. And yet people still don't seem to be in e-commerce, for example, particularly interested or worried about the subject. It is, as Carl said, you're not worried until you get bitten. And once you've got bitten, well, it's too late. As Neil said, you may well be out of a job because your website is closed down forever. So it is a very serious problem, I believe, a very concerning problem for us all. How do we get people to be more aware? I agree entirely with Carl. One of the big problems has been clearly worldwide that when people moved into their homes from their offices, they left the safe space where security officers could monitor what computers were being used, etc., etc., etc. What we may do on our personal computers, for example, is open emails sent to a Gmail account, for example, which then create malware on our computer, and that will cause problems. And I think just very quickly, we talk about malware, we talk about ransomware, but we do have to remember that there are so many different types of attack. Some of them are not at all evident. Some you may never know you were attacked at all because they're using little viruses in your computer to search and look for company secrets, even government secrets. So I think that we also have to remember that malware is a very, very broad thing. It's not just asking you for money. It's not just asking you for ransomware. It is also industrial spying and government spying too. And that comes from inventors who live in very clearly known areas of the world. And they do a lot of industrial.
Thank you for that, Alistair. I think just you're adding on to what Carl was saying in that, you know, we need more awareness, we need more training, and we need people to basically understand the cycle of what cybersecurity actually means in an organization. Thank you for that. Having said that, I would like our delegates who are attending to please participate in our poll. We have the first question, which is rate the impact that cybercrime incidents would have on your business. Rate the impact that a cybercrime incident would have on your business. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to engage with that poll question before I move on. All right, hopefully everyone has participated in our poll, the first question. We have, wow, high impact. We've got about 50% high impact, 25% severe impact. That's quite interesting. No one in low impact. So you're basically saying that a cyber incident would mean horrible things would happen in your organization, and the lack of preparedness could see your door shut, as Alistair has said earlier. Neil, I'm going to come back to you about this particular issue here. Are there any practical steps that a business can take to reduce exposure to cybercrime? I mean, what can I practically do as a business to reduce this exposure?
So the first thing is to stop thinking about it as a technical challenge. It's a business challenge. The boardroom, no matter how big or small your organization is, you need to think about it. The directors need to think about it seriously. They need to stop thinking that it's just a technical issue that a few IT people can sort out for them. And there are 7 key strategies which essentially enable organizations to become cyber resilient from the top down. I won't go through all of those now, but you can go to, there's a simple website, cyber7.global, that tell you all about those 7 strategies, but just 2 I will pick on. One, which has already been mentioned by my esteemed colleagues, which is skills and awareness. But the second one, which is, I think, probably one of the headlines of the 7, is budget. Boardrooms are simply not budgeting enough, not only for security. In fact, actually, most boardrooms don't budget for security at all. They expect it to be done on a shoestring. But also, and probably more easily understood, is that organizations simply are not budgeting sufficiently for IT in the first place. Organizations need to think that essentially, if they're around about 5% of their revenue should be spent on information technology, obviously that's going to vary slightly depending on the sector that a business operates within, but that generally should be, if you like, a finger in the air figure. And you find that most organizations are way under that, and the result of that is that they are running legacy technologies which are very vulnerable and easy to take advantage of and break into. So, yeah, as I say, start really at the boardroom and then work your way down, and stop thinking that that cybersecurity is a problem that you can solve just by asking someone in your IT department to do it on a part-time basis.
Thanks, Neil. That's actually very powerful. Budgets, you will know in most organizations, when you think about IT, it's probably right there in the same area as your marketing budget, which is always a battle between those two in an organization. But true, skills, again, it's about skills. You cannot expect someone who just probably studied the minimal in IT to be able to solve these types of problems. And utilizing equipment, as you say, that is outdated, that is not keeping up with the technologies of the criminals, is going to put you in a bad position as well. Thank you, Neil. I'm going to run another poll question at the moment. It is, how well prepared are you for a cyber incident? How well prepared are you for a cyber incident? So please engage with that poll question for me. And remember to use the chat function or the Q&A function to ask your questions or engage with us, as we will take those questions at the end with our panel. All right, I'm going to bring Alistair into the conversation here, and we're talking now regulation. I've got my poll results. I can share those with you. So we're looking at 50% not prepared, unsure of your digital assets, cyber risk or response plan. 50% of the respondents say they're not prepared. I think then it is important to engage with the likes of Neil and Carl in that regard as the experts, but I'll leave you to chat with them on the side there as well. So coming back to you, Alistair, and regulation comes into play now. What does the POPIA Act, or the POPI Act, mean for business being accountable for data breaches on the system? You know, we're talking about now losing money, we're talking about losing reputation and shutting down your door, but then what does also mean about regulation when it comes to the POPI Act? How am I going to remain compliant, and what does it mean when there's a data breach?
Thanks very much indeed. In fact, there are 2 laws now which we need to take into consideration. The first one is POPIA, of course, and the second one is the Cybercrime Act, which was signed by the President in June. And we're not quite sure yet, because they haven't published the implementation rules for that act, what it's going to require. But so with POPIA, as you will all know, if there is a data breach, and that is within a reasonable time, it doesn't mean after 2 or 3 months, it means after maybe a couple of days to inform the regulator that you have and hacked you and taken out data. Of course, means not just individual data, but under South African law, it also means company data. So be aware of that. So it means if someone's come in and taken your marketing list, for example, or your client list rather, that is also considered to be personal data under the POPIA. You have to inform the regulator, and the regulator then is required to tell you exactly what you have to do. That could be to send out a message to all your suppliers, all your customers, to say, sorry, we've been breached. Your data may have been stolen, and please take the measures necessary in order to make sure that you are safe. So, for example, if there's a bank account involved, you have to tell the consumer your bank details may have been stolen. If they have been, please inform your bank, etc., etc., etc. So these are the things which are then up to the regulator and the company to do. The problem today is exactly what Carl said, that one of the people who've been maliciously attacked has been the Justice Ministry. So you will find it rather difficult to get in touch with the regulator at the moment. Their website has been down for quite some time. I didn't check today if it's up yet, but it's been down for quite some time, and therefore you can't get hold of the regulator. An ironic position to be in as a regulator. That is the POPIA in a nutshell. So if there has been a database, you have to inform the regulator, you have to discuss, and you may well have to inform your customers, your database, and tell them what's happened, etc. If you don't do that, you can be, a criminal case can be brought against you for ignoring the law. It's very often been the case elsewhere that has happened, and it's also very often been the case that there's been an enormous loss of because people have not done in the US had 2017 or so, and they never told people. When it came out in the press, they got really crucified. The CEO was fired, the board was fired, and Target dropped from being the third retailer in the US to being something like the 8th retailer. People just did not trust Target any longer. And Target is still there, but it's struggling to get back to its original path. With the cybercrime, as I said, we're still waiting for the implementation details to come out. Serious and obligation on ordinary business and on the ordinary people too. Security hub, know if you've been attacked of an attack. So it's not just if you've lost data. This is if you've been attacked in any way, ransomware or whatever. And if you don't do that, there are criminal ability. The cyber hub can take a criminal case against you. So it's quite a serious piece of legislation. We're quite concerned about it because we think it's actually going to fall rather heavily on SMEs. compared to larger companies, obviously, who have more ability. So that is the cyber crimes. We'll have to see how it goes. There are also other countries, obviously in Africa. We were talking about the African Free Trade Area. Jackie raised that. There is the Malibu Convention, but that is being updated. And the Malibu Convention is on cybersecurity and data protection. Will be updated, we understand, within the next couple of years. And we're working closely with the African Union on these sorts of issues. So that's my report on that. It's not as dire as people think, but you do need to be aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you there, Alistair. You bring out an important aspect again, as everything else that's mentioned here today, about regulation and the fact that if you have been breached, you have to report this to the regulator. Otherwise, you stand to be taken, well, fined, imprisoned as well. Which brings me back to you, Carl. How does a business know it has been attacked, and what type of attacks are out there, and how identifiable are they to an organization?
Okay, so back to doom and gloom. Okay, so my colleagues mentioned phishing attacks being the most popular, but in SA, phishing and mobile fraud are the current most popular forms of cyber attacks, and they're highly successful. And that's presumably because of poor education, as well as the increase in mobile banking uptake without rise in cybersecurity awareness. Ransomware is the third most popular form of cyber fraud. And the reality of that is it's cheaply and easily available to even unskilled cyber criminals, and they can deploy these attacks quite easily. Other forms of online fraud are email scams, where cyber criminals pose as business people trying to hand over hard sums of cash to you. You know, you just have to comply by giving them personal details, and a lot of people still fall for these things. On the doom and gloom side, how do companies know they've been compromised? Globally, cybercrimes increased by over 600% due to the COVID-19 pandemic. 73% of Black hat hackers rendered traditional firewalls as irrelevant and obsolete. On the most damaging forms of online fraud is the invisible enemy, where viruses are picked up from browsing internet or downloading files that compromises users' privacy, as well as the companies that they work for. And these criminals that render these viruses are based anywhere in the world. Viruses only become obvious when it starts becoming problematic on the user's device or in the company's environment. So Trojans and keyloggers sit in the background silently and collecting account details, banking information, and so on and so forth. And the thing is that 93% of successful data breaches occur in less than a minute. But it takes a business, 80% of businesses take a week or so to realize that there's been a data breach. Now, during that time, while the systems have been breached, Trojans or malware get installed on the enterprise systems or on the user's PCs, and when attacks become evident, we only realize first stage attacks, and we don't realize that certain things are already embedded in systems, which gives the ability to threat actors to do multi-stage attacks, double extortion attacks, or multi-stage DDoS attacks. The average time in 2019 to identify that systems were breached was 206 days. And currently still, the average life cycle of a breach is 314 days. That's the time from the breach to containment. You know, when we did surveillance on most of the entities at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, we found huge vulnerabilities. And as we discussed earlier, approaching companies, it was a futile exercise. I just want to reflect on some of the breaches that occurred recently, just yesterday. There's a these things. What I'm going to mention now, it's public knowledge, so I don't have to hide names and stuff because it's public record. There's a company called Debt In. They do debt collections for most of our big credit providers. They were breached yesterday. Telecom clients' personal information, banking information was leaked. This is September this year. Department of Justice, as we've mentioned a few times. July, Cape Blood Service, Transnet. July, April, the same company Debt In had a data breach, which resulted in a ransomware attack on African Bank. March, PPS insurance was breached. September 2020. This one I think is probably the most significant breach that happened in our country that was kind of like just swept under the rug, and it was the breach of Experian. Experian is one of the largest credit bureaus in the country or in the world. Now, Neil mentioned about legislation and that type of stuff. We need to be geared, in other countries globally, if data breaches as severe as this happens, there has to be recourse from government to institute remedial action and also to do recoveries against those companies on breaches. All our data as South African citizens has been leaked, and there's been absolutely no recourse against Experian for that. Whether it was because of their own, how can you say, lack of prudence in maintaining system security, or whether it was a genuine breach from externally, we don't know. All we know is that all our data as South Africans have been leaked. That's personal data, banking data, you name it. It's out there. August 2020, a month before Experian, Momentum Metropolitan suffered a huge breach. June 2020, Life Healthcare Systems were hacked. 2019, last year also, City of Joburg, Civil Aviation Authority, ESCOM, our local banks were compromised, and it was SWIFT was blamed for that. And the list just goes on and on. So, we really have, as a government, really needs to step up their game to enforce that there is remedial action and to force companies to comply to regulations.
Thank you, Carl. I think you've given us food for thought in terms of how we protect ourselves. I mean, you're saying downloads add to the issues at hand. Trojans and viruses play an important part, but most importantly, what I picked up from you is the amount of time it takes for a breach to be recognized in an organization. That is quite scary to hear. And number two, the fact that law enforcement is not on top of it when it comes to securing organizations in this particular space. So yes, having said that, I'm going to now launch the next poll for help if you fell victim to cybercrime. Who would you contact for help if you fell victim to cybercrime? Give you a couple of seconds to engage us there. All right, while we wait for the poll results, I'm going to ask Neil to just step forward here for a moment here. We've had quite a lot of information today regarding, how one is at risk, who has been at risk, and what some of the hurdles are in preventing us from moving forward swiftly as industries in South Africa. So just coming back to the poll results, 50% said external cyber specialist. That's who you would contact, an external cyber specialist. And 33% said internet service provider. Perhaps that leads me then to what Neil can engage us with in that regard. Now, realistically, what support can businesses expect from law enforcement, lawyers, ISPs, and IT support in dealing with the fallout with a cyber attack? Now, that comes back to that last question is, who am I going to lean on? Who should I be leaning on when I have a cyber attack at hand? Neil?
Okay, so it's a very good question. firstly, I would say that organizations, as I'm sure, it doesn't have to be a cyber incident, it could be any type of incident. Most organizations want to be able to rely on someone that's got experience. It doesn't matter what we do in our lives, right? If we have some kind of crisis or issue, whether it's a health issue, whether it's anything at all, we want to be able to rely on people who are experienced to be able to assist us in dealing with that incident. And there is a very big, I'm sure Carl will agree, there is a huge lack of organizations that really can offer that type of support for businesses in South Africa. And that also extends to government and the police. What I would say about the police in their defense, if you like, is that we don't generally rely on the police for support when it comes to burglaries and things like that. We might report the crime, we might hope that the police will investigate the crime, but in terms of actually helping us to secure our premises or our properties, we don't expect too much from them in that regard. And so really it's in the cybercrime world. You can expect to report an incident to the police, and you can hope that they will investigate depending on their other priorities. But certainly I don't think one should have the expectation that the police can actually help you recover your business and secure your systems. And I don't think they should. When it comes to where you can rely on support, and that's really what Storm Guidance is all about, we have a very experienced team of first responders. We have a hotline. We've got a service which we've launched in South Africa called Cybercare. It's a very simple website, cyber.care, and we provide that hotline and all of the digital investigations and recovery advice to our clients through a simple monthly subscription, low cost monthly subscription. So that's the way that we are aiming to deliver support for South African businesses. Very similar, if you like, to a sort of roadside assistance type model, sort of low cost, but experienced and able to help organisations when they have an incident. And that probably leads me on to the last point, and that is that the experience is a very important point. We deal with many hundreds of incidents a year, and in managing those incidents or responding to them, we interface and work with the IT departments and the IT providers, if they have third-party providers of the victim organisation. And we generally do find that those IT support organisations, whilst they would, if you like, whilst they do everything, they mean well, if you like, they try and help their clients. Because they are inexperienced, they often do the wrong thing at the wrong time, and unfortunately that means that, for instance, vital evidence is destroyed, systems aren't recovered properly or effectively. As Carl was just mentioning there, one organisation in South Africa certainly seems to have suffered an incident, dealt with it inadequately. And then that the attackers have managed to come back again and have a second bite of the cherry. So certainly having a really experienced team, cyber incidents, I know, or cyber losses and cyber risk is no different to any other issue in business and in life generally. You want someone that's experienced to help you.
Fabulous. Now, Neil, it leads me to the next question. You happen to mention Cybercare as a product that assists organizations in dealing with cyber attacks. Now, how does that speak to SMMEs in South Africa? How does Cybercare link to SMMEs as opposed to speaking about large corporations? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's designed specifically for SMMEs. And that's one of the reasons why we are interfacing with associations such as the SAUBC. Well, although SAUBC are a sort of an association of associations, so to speak, but we are approaching SMMEs in that particular way so that they can take advantage of the Cybercare service and subscribe to it through their associations, to have the peace of mind that when they go to bed at night, if their businesses are hit by a ransomware attack or any other type of cyber incident, that they know that they can rely on someone that can help them and recover their business.
Thank you there, Neil. I'm very aware of the time we have, and I know everyone's busy, so I'm going to run the last poll question at this time to get your input. Would you be interested in cybercare as a service or membership benefit? This is what Neil just described as an SMME targeted solution for cybersecurity. So you just give me your input there. I'll give you a couple of seconds, and then I'll go through to my questions. All right, whilst we wait for the poll results, we have them, there we have. 83% is yes. Would you be interested in cybercare as a service or membership benefit? 83% of us said yes. So that is an indication of the scope of the problem that we have in South Africa. And at least we have organizations openly saying they're not ready, they're not prepared, they don't have the tools, they don't know where to go. Which makes engagements like this very important and very helpful to SMME spaces. All right, I have a question from Landiwe Mahlangu. She says, is insuring against cyber attack unwittingly encourages cyber attack, particularly ransomware? Is insuring against cyber attack unwittingly?
I would say that most of the time it doesn't. It has driven part of the rise in ransomware attacks. There are still very, very comparatively, even in the US and the UK, where cyber insurance is much more popular than it is in South Africa. There are still a comparatively low number of businesses that have got cover. In the US, it's around about 35%. In the UK, it's still in the teens in terms of market penetration for cyber insurance. We have had a few incidents where it's been reasonably apparent from the forensic results that the attackers have been looking to see if they can find insurance documents so that they can determine whether or not the victim organization is insured, and then they can then use that intelligence to make their ransomware demand. So there have been a few incidents. We've had one of those incidents. And certainly insurers have really caught a cold on this in the last 18 months, where they have paid out huge sums, certainly didn't expect to have to pay out quite so much. And that's led to a real hardening of the cyber insurance markets. Premium prices have gone up by sometimes threefold. And insurers are being very, very diligent in assessing organizations. We certainly do a lot of work now in assessments to determine whether or not insured clients have got in place requisite safeguards to protect against ransomware attacks.
Thank you very much, Neil, for that. I'm very wary of the time, and we said we are at 1 o'clock panel discussion. I'd like to encourage those who are perhaps too shy to put the questions forward to please make contact with Neil and the organization, Carl and Alistair, in that regard. I'd like to thank the SAUBC for being part and parcel of making this event possible. And I'd love to thank my panelists. That's Neil, that is Carl, and that is Alistair. We thank you very, very much. And we hope that our participants were able to gather very important information to ensure that a cyber attack does not happen to their organization. Number two, prepare themselves, how to prepare and plan. And what Neil said as part of my parting words is to ask the experts. Don't just drill it down to the IT guy in the basement. It really requires specialist input. And I will say that as my parting sentence and say, we wish you a very good journey on your cybersecurity journey. Thank you, everyone.